Okay, here we are again. Welcome, everybody. We are back. This is the We Quit Booze Brothers, which is a podcast where we try to have honest, no fluff conversations about our various experiences of quitting alcohol. And with me, as always, is my brother Matt. Hello, Matt.
Good morning, Mark. Yeah, great to be back. It's a very beautiful day here. I know most of Europe is seeing sunshine, so we're happy. Hopefully, you're all happy and ready for the topic of today. Also, you're getting to see more of where I live because, as you know, we live with families, etc. And I have been kicked out of my normal room, so I'm now in my son's room, which is an odd place because I never understand how adolescent children can sort of destroy a room without actually trying to destroy it. But there you go. That's where I am today.
There you go. Yeah, and I'm back in sunny Mallorca. So yeah, we really are enjoying the lovely weather. And there you go. So right, okay. Well, so the topic of conversation for today is, I think, it's quite a big one,
It's a
actually.
massive one, I would say.
Yeah, we were talking about it offline, and we think that this might be one that maybe we'll discuss over, two or three podcasts, or maybe we'll just sort of weave it into other conversation. It's a big one, and it's something which I think anybody who has had any experience of drinking alcohol in any quantity will have experienced, and it's about the shame that comes with drinking alcohol, the shame that you feel when you are drinking alcohol. I think that occasionally, we talk about the three stages here on this podcast. There's the bit before you quit, and there's definitely a sort of a dynamic associated with how you're feeling, how you're thinking, how you approach the decision to quit. There's the transitional period when you stop drinking and all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, shit, how do I deal with the world? And then there's a period after you've quit, which is the one that Matt and I are in, where you're a non-drinker. And, even in that stage, I think certainly I've had, not often, but there'll be these weird times where every now and again, just pop into my head and I'll look back at maybe some of the things I did, maybe some of the experiences, and feel a sense of shame. So I think you can feel the shame when you are drinking. I think you get that. And I think sometimes you can get a sense of shame after. And I just want to make sort of 3 points to begin with. We'll see where the conversation takes us and we'll go from there. I think the first thing I wanted to make is how this sort of injustice of this world of alcohol, because society promotes alcohol. Society normalizes alcohol. Modern culture um, glamorizes drinking alcohol. Just go watch a James Bond film, and if you're a man, this sort of representation of, a male role model is somebody who drinks heavily. Um, if you're a female, there is just this sort of constant, the Prosecco o'clock, the kind of mummy's little help. There's this society. It makes it sound fun and friendly and warm and something you should do. And this is how we celebrate. So it really, really, society is responsible for the fact that most people drink. I think most people end up drinking because they live in the world, and the world they live in is a one where it's recommended. And then what society does is it heaps a whole load of shame on anybody who ends up struggling with what is, as we've already discussed, a highly addictive, psychoactive substance. It's basically a drug. So the you end up with this sort of like unfair balance. On the one hand, society is encouraging you to do it, and then on the sort of, on the other hand, if you do it, they sort of fold their arms and say, "Well, I can't believe you're doing that." It's just this sort of fucking weird,
Mm.
shame-infused sort of centrifuge, if you like. And I heard there's a really good, if you take nothing else away from this podcast, there's this fantastic woman called Brené Brown. I don't know if you've heard of her. I'll try and put it in the show notes. She does a whole TED talk on shame and vulnerability. And she says if you put shame in a petri dish, the way to make it grow is to feed it with silence, secrecy, and judgment. So if you are drinking and you're feeling ashamed of yourself, the way out of it is to start talking about it. The way out of it is to start being honest. Equally, if you put shame in a petri dish and you poured empathy on it, it will die. It will die. You know, kindness and understanding and empathy is the way through. And we'll talk more about it. Again, we said at the beginning, this is not one to cover in 10, 15 minutes.
Mm.
You know, there's all sorts of questions that sort of spring up, but we'll get from there. The second point that I want to make in and around this is you should always remember that you're not your behavior. If what you do and how you behave does not define who you are. And it's quite a difficult one to wrap your arms around. If you feel guilty or you feel shame, it's because you've got a moral compass. It's because that the person who you really are, it doesn't sit with you. You know, I tell you who doesn't feel shame and guilt is psychopaths. Psychopaths don't feel those things because they really are not great people. But normal, healthy people, like everybody in this room, everybody that's listening to it, we're all decent people who have done something, who've got involved in something that has sort of taken a hold of us and has driven certain patterns of behavior that lead to guilt and shame. Just another thing on that as well. Sorry, I going to reference Brené Brown again. She defines guilt as being something you feel bad that you've done, and shame is something that you feel bad about as because you think it's something you are. So shame is I'm shameful of that because I think I am that person, and guilt is something you say I'm sort of ashamed of something that I did. But you've got to separate your behavior from who you are. And all I would say to you is that you use that when you're drinking. It's part of the journey to sobriety. It's one of the things that drives people to stop because it's not who you are. It really isn't. And the sort of third point I want to make is that where you're in this sort of, I guess, negative cycle of I feel ashamed, to some extent for me, the shame and the guilt and everything else sort of drives kind of more drinking drives more of that. Look for progress, not perfection. Any day sober is better. And just sort of before I hand over to you, mate, is all of that shame does go when you stop. You replace it with pride, with a newfound identity. And I read something, I think it was a Buddhist teaching, and they talk about this idea of letting go and progressing, that you have to evolve and change and you have to let go. The person that you were when you do stop and you look back at what you were like when you drank, that was you then. That's not you now. And the fact that you might look back at it with a degree of shame is actually a really good sign, because it's highlighting the fact that, you know, that doesn't sit well with the person that you are. And like I said, if you felt fine, if you never felt shame, if this doesn't resonate with you, if you're sitting there thinking, no, I never feel any shame, I never feel any guilt, I never feel any vulnerability, then,
You're a
you know,
psychopath.
maybe, but the fact that you do feel those things is actually a really good sign. So anyway, well, quite a big subject, as I say. I better hand over to you because, yeah, let's try a lot to unpack, but more to say on it. But yeah, I don't know. Any sort of thoughts on that, mate?
First thought is we've done a lot of these podcasts now. We've done a lot of these videos. We do them for our own benefit, for your benefit. We do them because we enjoy doing it, really. We're not so amateur what we do. We know that, but it doesn't matter. That was one of the best openings I think you've done. I think that was absolutely phenomenal. And so it's such a great subject. It's such an important subject. It's such a big subject. I cannot believe anybody who's listening or watching who has had struggles, problems with alcohol or drugs has not felt shame. I really can't. I am 100% sure that it affects us all. Shame is an odd one because it's actually what saved me. Without shame, I honestly, I wouldn't have had my rock bottom moment, my reality check for those of you who've read the book Man Get Sober, we've been through this in the podcast before. My final day was a day where I got drunk at an inappropriate time, and that is what absolutely rocked me, was when I turned up at an event that I had organized, and I turned up drunk and no one else was, and that shame hit me like a bus. I suddenly became acutely aware of kind of what I'd become, which is a person who has a great, huge problem with alcohol. And it got worse as the evening progressed. And then that was 100% what led to my decision, what triggered my brain to go, you can't live like this anymore. This has to stop. So without shame, I wouldn't be sat here today, and I wouldn't be doing this today. And one thing I would say about shame as well is what you said is so right, Mark. You get those moments of suddenly a memory will come or something will trigger, and you'll go, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. That was fucking terrible, But what I would say to anybody out there is, if you stop drinking, we've all done shameful things. We've all done things we feel guilty about. We've all done things that weren't right. I can remember one time I went out on like a Saturday, and my mother-in-law was over staying with us, and I said, oh, I'm just going out for a couple of beers. I didn't get home till the next day, and I was not in a great way. I don't know if I'd messaged or anything, it was not good, and I felt bloody awful. Once the hangover kicked in, once the realization my wife was there, and just the look on her face, that's just one example of many, and some probably worse. But the shame of the guilt, but as I say in the book as well, the problem with alcohol is it's addictive, and until you've addressed that, those shameful events, that guilt will continue. I say in the book, and it's a bit crass, I know, but I talk about, you could have gone to a wedding, you could have insulted the bride, you could have tried to dry hump the mother-in-law on the dance floor, you could have puked on the table, and the next day you will feel shame and guilt and apologize to all those people and say how sorry you are, etc. But if you have a problem with alcohol, you'll do it again. It will, it just will happen. So shame and guilt is part of it. But where I was going with that, sorry, is when you do stop, that's all in the past. And the reality is the decisions you make when you're drunk are not good. Right? End of story. What I loved was the adventure, particularly with drugs as well, was that excitement at the beginning, that where's the night going to take us and all that. But it would lead me into situations that were just plain wrong, and that's when the shame would come, the terrible feeling sometimes of waking up and just going, what was that all about? Why didn't I just come? How many times did I regret not just coming home at like 11 o'clock? A mate of mine would have left and go, oh, you going? And I'd be, oh yeah, I'll leave in 10 minutes. It never was. So yeah, you're clearer in your thinking, but I think we need to do another session on this at some stage, because there's so much to talk about. Yeah, I don't know. What's your reflection on that?
Yeah, it's so true, and I think maybe just to sort of kind of reflect on that, the fact that when you are drinking, and your point about, so weird, isn't it, how drinking makes you do things you clearly wouldn't do if you were sober. And which is sort of, on the one hand, why you do it, I suppose, because you want to, maybe, people talk about, I want to get out of my head. I mean, that was actually a pretty good and true reflection for me. I think my drinking was all about, when I drank, I could just get out of my head. I could spending time in my head felt overwhelming and kind of exhausting for me. So but equally, so then why are we surprised that we do things that we perhaps wouldn't normally do when we're sober? And then you wake up and you feel that shame, but you can use it for positive. I think, when you start to feel uncomfortable with things, when you start to feel angry, annoyed, shameful, any anxiety, they're actually really good signs. I want to kind of make that point. You've said it.
Mm,
The reason you quit, it was the shame that stopped you. And I think that I just want to say to anybody listening to this, number one, good for you if you feel that. It means you're a nice, to me, it means you're a good person. It means that you've got a moral compass, that you are not aligned with that way of behavior, and try to use that. And Matt and I often talk about this thing about a return to self. When you stop drinking, it allows you to come back to the person that you are. But actually, it's almost more beneficial because I think you've had that experience, you've learned from that experience, and you can then take empathy into this next phase of how you're going to live, which is both good for you and also good for other people. I
mm.
sort of have this sense that because you were a drinker, if you had a problem with alcohol and you stop doing it, I kind of feel like you may well end up in a better place than you ever would if you never drank at all. I think you learned so many valuable lessons about the world. World is, my life is tricky. You've got to navigate your way through. If you look back over your life and you think about all the near scrapes and all the difficult situations, it's sort of always an evolving, set of challenges. So, if you were somebody that drank a lot, or if you are somebody that drinks a lot, it's just part of your journey. And I think they're the
Yeah,
two messages. Number one, it's a galvanizing force to help you stop. And then secondly, once you have stopped, it's important to recognize that you've moved on. What I'll just finish on this, and I think maybe we can sort of come back to it. But one of the really big problems I have, and this is a bit of a random aside, but I was thinking about it this morning because I knew we were going to be talking about this, is we were talking yesterday about school and academics and degrees and, and all that sort of stuff, and talking about our children came up. We were because I'm in Spain with our parents right now, so Matt's in France, but I'm there. So we were talking about that, and I feel like it's a really strange thing that a big part of your life is sort of based on how you performed and behaved as a child. I'm not
mm,
the same person I was when I was a child. I'm
yeah,
different. I've moved on. That, like I said, that Buddhist thing about you have to evolve, you have to let go. They talk about one of the sources of unhappiness is people don't let go. They either don't let go to negative emotions or they actually don't let go to positive. Positive could be one too. You go, it was great then. Oh, I loved it. It was so much better then. And it's so you've got to let go. You have to evolve, you have to develop, and you have to move on.
yeah,
And in a weird way, we don't do that so much in Western society. But if you have quit, celebrate it. You've moved on. You're a different person. You're not the same person. And use your wisdom to be kind to you and maybe to others as well.
yeah. And I think as well, another thing is, you can have done bad things, people have, but I love this quote, which is, the best apology is a change in behavior.
Mm,
And I totally agree with that. That's exactly what happened to me. I wasn't particularly proud of the person I was, but now I am very proud of the person I am,
mm,
and I know
mm,
that the people around me are too, and that's all that matters. I think it's actually part of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is where they get you to write down everything you've done and actually apologize to those people you've maybe hurt and affected. I'm not suggesting that you need to do that. If that's something you want to do, what a great thing! Absolutely. In
mm,
fact, in the Robbie Williams film Better Man,
mm,
there's a part of him, actually going to apologize to the people that he hurt when he was
mm.
struggling with addiction. So yeah,
Yeah,
so I think,
separate behavior from who you are.
yeah,
Be
exactly,
it to
100%.
redefine who you are. So that's important. So cool.
And don't we we've all been through it. Like I say, everybody has a sense of shame. It may have been just the fact that you ended up that way. But the reality is if you've come out the other end, there is no shame. It's all pride. It's all positive, and you should be in. You should celebrate that, and that's why we do this.
Brilliant. Okay, well let's leave it there. I will put the check out the Brené Brown TED
Yeah,
Talk. She does
I'm
one
going to
on
check it out. I haven't seen
She
the
does
stuff.
two. She does one on vulnerability, which is amazing, and she does one on shame. It's really excellent to listen to, and it'll help enormously. So, and we'll come back to this one
Yeah,
because
we will.
we gave ourselves this topic to discuss, and I think both of us were a little bit overwhelmed by it because
Mm.
it's quite a big one, and I'm not sure we've done it full justice, but hopefully that's helped. And like I said, this is all about our experience. We've been through this. We've felt the shame, we've felt the guilt, we've been through the change, we know how we feel now. And the fact is that we want to try and transfer this amazing life that we have and sense of pride in not drinking to everybody else. So that's kind of part of it. So right, we'll leave it there. As I always say, never quit quitting. Do all the things, tick all the boxes, do all the comments, and everything you can to help us try and get this in front of as many people as possible. We really do appreciate it. But for now, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him. Till the next time. Cheers.
Bye bye.